Hello out there, team. Welcome to tonight's Hangout. I wanted to hop on and share some thoughts with you. Again, I know your time is valuable, and I know we're working on the negotiation exercise and trying to keep it all together. So congratulations on getting closer to the end of the semester. I know it's busy, but I hope that you've drawn a lot from this class. I know that you're putting in a lot of effort and work. So thank you for that. It is an investment, and wanted to share an initial thought. About that, about time. I recently ordered some books written by Richard L. Evans. I'm kind of a sucker for the old church books, and my first mission president is too, and he posts quotes all the time still and writes blog posts, and he is always sharing great things. Anyway, sorry, got distracted there. So, Richard L. Evans, he was an apostle, but he also was the original voice of music and the spoken word. For many, many decades, he did that. And he thankfully wrote books with some of those messages, ordered some on Amazon, got one here that was published in 1942. And there's just some brilliant thoughts in this little book, little one-pagers, little paragraphs that go a long way. And this is what he said about speed and direction. And I wanted to invite you to think about that in context of investing your time. In our mad struggle to get somewhere, it is to be hoped that we may not lose sight of where it is we want to get. Our day has come to a place great emphasis on speed and efficiency. But let it be borne in mind that these things are not virtues in and of themselves, but are useful only when applied with wisdom and purpose. What good is speed if it takes us more quickly to the wrong destination? What good is efficiency if it is applied to a machine or a system of degradation or destruction? A human life is an eternal thing, and no matter how much we attempt to crowd into it, we can live it no faster than time passes. And it is well to remember, even in this day of speed, that enduring qualities are worth infinitely more than getting nowhere fast. It is not the rapidity with which a man travels that gives us concern. It is the destination he has in view. So, think about that in pursuit of your education. Sometimes we say, I've got to hurry and get my degree. I've got to hurry and get my new job. I've got to hurry and move. And we lose sight of that efficiency. So wanted to share that thought with you from Elder Evans, to be sure to remember that speed and efficiency aren't virtues. They're vehicles, but they are not virtues. The most important thing are enduring qualities, things that we take with us into eternity. Elder Oaks said that the judgment day is not a summation of what we have done. It is more a review of what we have become. So I wanted to share that with you, and I know that's true. As we focus on what matters and we pace ourselves, we're going to be better off eternally. So, all right, how's it going, Porter? Well, welcome. Can you hear me?
What was that?
I just wondered if you could hear me.
I couldn't, but I can now. Sorry.
All right, sweet. Well, thanks for joining. I just was sharing a thought from Richard L. Evans about speed and direction. So, how's it going for you?
Oh, it's going.
Good. Well, thanks for joining. I don't know who else will make it, but we'll stay on here for a bit. Just wanted to share a thought, point out a website in regards to union activity, and then just talk a little bit about doohickeys, answer any questions. So, anything that is on your mind, Porter?
No, not really. I do have just a question about the doohickeys one when we get there.
Okay, we can jump into that. What questions do you have?
So one of our topics is on organized labor.
Okay.
Struggling to come up with the 4 solutions to that.
Okay. And how are you addressing organized labor? Are you, I guess, what problem have you identified with it? Because there's different directions you can look at it. If you're on the side of being for it, promoting the union side of things, or if you're trying to keep the unions away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we would be more focused on trying to please the people without them forming a union is more, I think, where we wanted to go.
Yeah, and that's that's common. In the company I currently work for, they have us train on that. So, do you have any solutions in mind at this point?
Kind of what we've discussed in our group meetings along that similar way. Just if, trying to please them to make them know that they're, I guess, valued employees and all of that.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I think there's a lot that feeds into that. The biggest thing that when you're I don't want to use the negative term, but when you're anti-union, when you're trying to stay away from letting the unions in, uh, creating that trust, because you don't want, once a union's in there, like when you have a complaint, it takes forever to get it resolved. There's issues. So if I'm an employee in a union, I can't go to the boss and complain. I've got to go to the union leader, file a grievance, and then they work through the union to get back to me. So, not letting the union in removes that middleman. So I think, solutions surrounding the communication channels, maybe even like you could, if you wanted to, you could reference policy about complaints, a grievance policy, or a support, what levels of support people have when they have complaints and how those are addressed. That's something that, you can put in, and what would be HR's process for handling those.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one area, because, issues come up, people have difficulties, there's complaints, and we need to have policies around the big stuff for sure. Sexual harassment, discrimination. We've learned about safety now, some of those big things, but a company can also successfully put out an approach of how they want to present themselves as having a listening ear. So, policy can do that. Certain initiatives can do that. Maybe things that you're going to require of your managers, things like that. One thing I was going to share tonight too was there is a group called the National Labor Relations Board, and they're a government agency specifically tasked to protect union activity. So on their website, which is NLRB, like boy, nlrb.gov, it says the National Labor Relations Board protects the rights of most private sector employees to join together with or without a union to improve their wages and working conditions. If you believe your rights have been violated, or that an employer or a union has engaged in unlawful conduct, you may file a charge through one of our regional offices. And so on the union side, there is protected activity that even if you're not unionized, it's good to be aware of these things. Had an example of that this week in my work, where we have a new department that came on board, a new project and a new client. These employees that hired onto this project, they're getting a raise, but they were also promised things with the tools that they would have access to, but the tools haven't been there. So the employees have been talking to each other and been chatting with each other saying, hey, I'm going to look for work at this other competitor, or I could go here and make more money. a site director gets frustrated by that because we want to retain our talent. But one of the things that the NLRB regulates is that right for those people to join together and gather and discuss wages or work opportunities. So the site director coming in and saying, you know, don't chat about those things, that's actually illegal. So, you know, that's something that's available to you guys as well. If you wanted to take a look at that website, Porter, it's nlrb.gov.
Okay. Is that something we could reference in the doohickeys paper then?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you see something that's kind of matching up with where you want to head with it, definitely. Because if you're union or not, it's good to know about those laws and those rights. And there's cases and decisions in there. There's a page about the rights that they protect. So.
Okay.
And it's definitely on the side of a union, but you know, companies need to be aware of those things. Like my example, we had employees talking about going to the competitor because they're frustrated. You know, going where they can make more money or where they would have better tools. And a lot of times we see it these days on social media. That's the same thing. Companies can have social media policies as far as how people are acting online and what they're saying about the company, acting as agents of their company. But they can also they do have the right to discuss that. So it gets interesting. I actually wrote a paper in my student days about the social media side of what the NLRB regulates. So hopefully that is helpful, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that'll help.
Anything else I can answer on that?
No, I think that gives me a pretty good direction to focus on.
Okay.
What I've got.
All right. Well, that's a good question, you know, and of course that's why we do these, and then we'll post it so others can hear that discussion. So, hi Marjorie, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining. Porter was just asking a question about the doohickeys paper. One of their topics is organized labor, so they were looking for topics there and ideas. And a website I pointed out there was the National Labor Relations Board. So, Marjorie, do you and your group have any questions about the paper? Doohickeys questions?
Daughter right now at Pathway, so I kind of have to talk a little. But I was just pulling it up because I was going to work on it while I was here.
Okay.
I'm working right now on the pulling it up. Wait, sorry, just give me a second.
Oh, you're fine.
So I was working right now on the wage and hour laws, and and specifically working on when the employees work more than 40 hours in a week. He was telling put their hours on the pay card, and so I was just trying to think of solutions to that problem, and I'm really kind of that's what I'm working on.
Okay. And you're talking about specifically in the doohickeys case, not being over the 40 hours he was not wanting to put on the time cards?
Well, just he'd asked him to do that. So I don't know if there's anything you can say or address or anything like that, about that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And
anything you have to say would be helpful.
Yeah. People have addressed it different ways in the paper. I think it mentions doohickeys is based in Illinois. So some folks have pulled up the state of Illinois payroll laws. Some have done it for Idaho. You can do either one, that's fine. But yeah, that's a big one actually, because you want to actually be compliant with payroll. And overtime law is actually federally based. It's a nationwide deal with overtime. So best way to address that is just, the law, how that works is, overtime is required, and it's on a weekly basis. So sometimes companies will try to interpret that differently. They'll say, oh, we look at it on a 2-week basis. They worked 50 hours one week, but they worked 30 hours the next. They still get overtime pay when they work that extra 10 hours in that 1 week. So anytime you hit over 40. And so, just at face value, you need to reference that law and be compliant with that, because if you don't, you could run into wage and hour losses and lawsuits. So as far as other solutions, I don't know, is that what you're looking for? Other solutions to address that, or?
I'm trying to come up, I'm sorry, I need to, I'm trying to think of solutions for hoping, you could help us understand, or maybe some experiences that you've had or seen like that with me. How serious of a matter?
Oh, how serious of a matter it can turn into?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen that in your work?
Yeah, that's good question. So about 1.5 years ago, we have a lot of people that work from home, and the company, the corporate headquarters, actually faced a big, huge lawsuit for all of the work at home employees because of the way that they were clocking in for their time. So what was happening is, to kind of manage overtime and keep people within their full-time hours without getting into too much overtime, they would instruct employees to get logged in, get all into the systems, get ready to get on the phone, make their calls, and do their work before they jump into the call queue. These were call center agents. And if you have that going on, and it's multiplied by a few thousand employees, that's a lot of time that seems like a savings. But those employees are entitled to that time. So anytime that they're doing work that could be compensable, is the term, it is the law that you pay them for that time. And then again, because we got caught up in that, there was some issues with that. It caused a lot of auditing. There was a lot of lawsuits that had to be responded to, and it took a lot from the company, a lot of time and energy and finances from the company to address that and get a settlement on that. So does that make sense? How it seems little?
Yeah.
Those little 5-10 minute discrepancies, you say, oh, that's not much. But especially when you work at home and you have to get into the systems, you're actually doing work. And if you're doing work that's compensable, you are obligated to that pay. So that's one that I've seen firsthand that affects us, and it still affects us now, especially with recent changes with the Fair Labor Standards Act.
What are some of the consequences? I mean, you say that they get sued. I mean, are there any kind of reprimands that the company gets? Instead, I mean, they have to obviously pay them, but are there any other consequences for them?
So it's huge, because we're a client-based company, so clients hire our company to do big portions of their important work. And so if there's these wage and hour claims going, it's a cost, but also it's in the arena of being fraudulent. And so these clients don't like that. They say, oh, you've got these lawsuits on you, you've got these activities going on that's fraudulent. We're going to find a different provider. And then that's a huge loss for business. So yeah, in my world, that was a big deal to keep those client relationships strong, and fraud is the huge, the big, that puts you on the blacklist pretty fast. So. And time, sadly, I wish it wasn't the case. In any business, time card fraud can be a big problem. I think it happens more than it should.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the whole world, but yeah, I know it's out there. Every environment I've been in, there's been issues, with kind of like when you're talking about accounting and you've got cash controls, you know, or a bishopric, you never have just one person handling the money. Same thing with time cards. If I'm a manager, I've got direct reports, I authority to adjust time cards and punch their time in to pay them accurately. But I'm not, if I've got influence on that for other teams, or I've got a buddy that works for another manager and I've suddenly got access to change that time card, or a family member or whoever it is, and we make those adjustments, we fudge a little on those, or we remove a schedule, or add time, especially a big no-no. That's all fraudulent behavior. So payroll is actually, it's usually part of HR, but a lot of times with big companies, payroll will be a separate entity because there's so much regulation and law to be aware of.
So the time cards go directly to payroll, right?
Usually.
Is that what?
Yeah, it depends on the company and the size of the company, but in my situation, big corporations, so the managers, so the supervisors approve the time cards for their people and the managers for their supervisors, and then it all goes to payroll.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's one of those things you wouldn't think it's a big problem because people just punch in and do their work and get paid, but the difficulty happens because of the fact that a manager has the ability to make changes. And if the changes are merited, yeah, that's what it's for. But if the changes are not merited and not right, or not correct, it's dangerous territory to walk in. So.
Well, what do you mean by not correct?
Well, so I mean, if you've got an hourly employee, like we've got supervisors that have teams of 12 to 15 people, and sometimes, common example, oh shoot, I forgot to clock out for lunch, so it shows me getting paid for that time, or I took a break, didn't punch out, stayed in a different punch. If that's not being accurate, or if that's being manipulated to benefit when it shouldn't, it's not correct, then that's what we're addressing.
Okay.
Payroll can, it has a lot that they handle. At the end of the day, it's like, hey, we're just trying to get people their paychecks, but there's, you've got overtime, you've got deductions, you've got employees that have garnishments. You want to make sure that's all administered right. You don't want to overpay someone and then have to redact that back from them if there was errors. So accuracy is very important, stuff like that.
So I have a question there real quick.
Yeah.
I work at Rexburg Motorsports as a mechanic, and I get paid flat rate. And the last little while, they've been kind of cracking down on us mechanics to make sure we punch in and out when we're supposed to, but we don't get paid on the clock like that. So why is there such a push for us to be accurate on clocking in and out when that's not how we get paid? Do you know how that would work?
Yeah, and I don't know all the ins and outs there, but so are you paid by project or by, tell me a little
Basically,
more about flat rate.
I get paid by job. So
By job.
Certain jobs should take me so long to do, and that's how much I get paid, whether I do it quicker or slower.
Oh, okay. So it's a little bit kind of templated or predetermined on, hey, this is a 3-hour job, and if you get it done in 2, then you get paid for.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'd have to, again, I don't know the ins and outs of the Rexburg Motorsports, but one thing is they could be tracking labor hours for different reasons. Just from a management standpoint, they might be tracking labor hours just to see labor and versus what is needed, what is being demanded, try to keep staffing where it should be. I don't know if that would match up with how you see things there.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're not, so do you clock in and are they wanting you to make sure you get 8 hours or what are they looking for?
They're just kind of tracking, like you said, when we're there, when we're working. I think mostly just to tell how accurate we are to what we're being paid to how much we're there type thing. But I don't know if that's something they have to do or just something they want to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't, off the top of my head, I don't know the regulatory part of that, what's required and what's not, versus definitely it could be a management effort to, make sure they're aligned on what they're paying out and what's the work that's being done.
Okay.
So, yeah, you've got my mind turning on that. I'm going to look into some more, see what I can find on that. I've never been in a environment where it's per job like that. I just took my car to the shop today, and so I was actually wondering about that. I paid for parts and labor, but I don't know how the employees are paid. I don't know if they're paid by the hour or by the job like you are. So
most mechanic shops are paid by the job, a flat rate basis. It
Okay.
kind of helps to keep them drag stuff out.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So you can't say, "Hey, I took 4 hours on this job, but should have only taken me 2." Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm guessing it's more on the management side where they're trying to track labor and costs and productivity. I'll look into the regulatory side though, see what I can find for you.
Okay.
So yeah, there's all kinds of scenarios. Contract work is another type of work that can be interesting. So, where you're not getting paid by the hour, but you're getting paid by the contract. You're getting paid to do a job over a month or 2 or 3 or 6. And we see a lot of contract work these days. You don't see a lot of people going to work for the same company for 30 years and a pension anymore. You see more job changes, you see more career pathing, and a lot of contract work or per job work. So, good questions. Anything else you're thinking about? Like I said, I'll look more into that flat rate pay and see what the regulatory environment looks like there. You'll notice with like waitresses, it's different for each state, but waitresses, I know in Idaho, they're making like $2.50 an hour, and depending on tips, so it's just a lot of different job types out there. In December, something to be aware of, in December of last year, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the minimum wage that is considered exempt for salary pay was raised. It almost doubled. So before the change in December, it was about 24,000, something like that. So you could pay employees a salary if they were making over that $24,000 amount. Okay, so that doesn't require them to clock in, doesn't require them to manage their hours. And when they're exempt in their salary, they don't get paid overtime, they just get paid that salary rate. This legislation changed that threshold to $47,000 a year. So that created a lot of changes for companies. and there was a 3-part test to determine, the types of job duties that were involved and the type of work, to decide if you needed to keep them salary and bump them up to the 47,000 threshold, or to move them from a salary employee to hourly. And so it did. It was a big change for our environment. All of our frontline supervisors were previously salaried. So, if they needed to take an extra half hour or an hour in a day to get some work done, that was fine, cost to the company. But now they're hourly. And the company wants, of course, to be very limited on overtime pay because it's time and a half. And so our supervisors now are managing directly to that 40-hour work week. So yeah, if they work 9 hours one day, they want to make sure and take a longer lunch the next day, or work 7 hours the next day and adjust to that 40 hours. So, and that's out on the Department of Labor website, the Fair Labor Standards Act. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, because with the new presidency that came in with President Trump, that's under review, and there were a couple states that tried to appeal that. So it's still enacted, but it is under review. So.
How many people did that affect in your company? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, you're fine. I'm trying to remember, but it was in the thousands. The company I work for is like 125,000 employees. So there's a lot of supervisors. So with our managers, we bumped them up to the 47 if they weren't there already. And then with the supervisors that report to those managers, we moved them down to hourly. So that was the decision by the company. And yeah, I think we have like 3,000 at that supervisor level.
Just curious, how long did that? December, how long did you have before you had to?
Oh yeah, good question. So they
make sure the changes took.
Yeah, they gave us, I think we had 6 to 8 months. They announced it and said this is effective December 31st. And so our company, to give it good due diligence, we made the change, in November. So we were actually a month early on getting that all switched over, but it was a big project and a lot of analysis, because, when you have that many employees, we had to figure out, okay, what's going to be most cost effective, moving hourly or bumping everybody up to the salary threshold versus paying out overtime, and they decided to move them all hourly. So, and that's an interesting thing to think about as well. I mean, would you rather pay overtime, or would you rather have them on salary and get the productivity out of them, but maybe pay a little more? So yeah, that's a recent change, and it's still in play. I don't know if it'll be adjusted. I think what a lot of companies and what a lot of lawmakers are trying to do is to get that number back down a little bit, because it went from like 23,000 to 47,000, and
huge.
It's a huge jump. Yeah. So if we can meet in the middle somewhere and drop that down in the 30s or something, it might be a little more doable for companies. So that's something you can look into too as well if you're needing something for doohickeys.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'll share. So I'll get the links out to the NLRB and then the FLSA changes out there on the Google community, so you can reference that. And then flat rate stuff. Yeah, that'll be interesting to find out more. Any other questions, thoughts?
No, I really enjoyed this week's discussion, the role play. That was really interesting. It made me really understand how difficult it is to try to negotiate salaries, and I was really quite surprised at the outcome.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed. I didn't know what I was doing, but negotiating, but it really kind of gave me a better idea of what it was like and some of the challenges that are faced. But was that really one of those turning points? because we talk about now, giving the employees benefits, and it's almost like the companies are attracting the employees, whereas, in the 80s, it was, before that point, there was a lot more unions. I just don't see that as much now.
Yeah, and it has changed. It's very interesting. Yeah, you're right. It's very interesting. It's fascinating. So now when you hear of companies going on strike and, they're collective bargaining, that's what they're doing. They're trying to negotiate, and it's a big layered process. But yeah, the environment has changed, and I don't know, the ratio of unions back in the 80s until now. I don't know if it's lessened or just kind of redistributed. But you are right in the fact that we are very much in an environment of talent attraction and retention. You'll hear phrases like the war for talent, and it's that's why I mentioned you don't see people sticking around with one company. It's so competitive. Everything is so competitive. It's very much kind of like, it's very similar to like pro sports. If you follow the NBA or any of these pro sports teams, I mean, how many professional sports players stays with one team now? Not very many. I mean, hardly any, because a contract for 3 to 5 years, and then they'll go to the next team that can pay them a max contract. And that's kind of similar now. What company has the best for me? What company that can pay me the most, has better benefits, and gives me the best development? I'm going to go there. So it does put the burden on companies to be attractive and know what they're looking for, so that they can keep their talent. Because you don't want to hemorrhage talent, and then you lose your competitive advantage. So,
Do you think that'll continue to be the way it is? Will it? I mean, just your opinion. Will it continue and get more? I don't know how to say it. More so.
I think, yeah, in my opinion, I don't see that changing. I think what we'll continue to see is how work is done. Because it's interesting, you hear about these states, for example, that are raising their minimum wage to, $15 an hour or whatever it is. Well, guess what the restaurants are doing, for example? They're like, okay, well, we'll bring in robots and kiosks. Mm-hmm. And it kills jobs. So, and then you've got a lot of people working from home. That's just becoming more and more. So the technology is enabling a lot of different type of work. Teleconferencing. I mean, we're all teleconferencing right now. I'm able to do this job as your instructor from home. But yeah, and I think as things change and as the economy changes, innovation changes, the type of work will change too. But I think I just don't see the competitiveness going away. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I don't. The internet and everything, we can all go and start our own business. We can all branch off, find the next best thing, go do some contract work, go do freelance work. It's pretty interesting.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a book out there. It's at my office, but it's actually a book written about that topic. But the funny thing is it was written like 12 years ago, and
no kidding.
Even that is getting, it's funny because even some of that has little changes in it. But that's a book that talks a lot about the contract work, and just the way we do work is always changing. So, but unions, I love the original history of unions. I think they're fascinating because unions came about during like the Great Depression. FDR came in with the New Deal, and people, the other thing was we didn't have the labor laws that we do. People were working 18 hours a day. They were dying. There's no safety regulations. There was young kids working. It just was terrible. So that's why people were banding together, saying, "Hey, we need some better pay. We need some more safe work environments." And the unions helped people in the labor force kind of stay afloat as we came out of the recession. And I think that fulfilled a wonderful purpose, and it still does for certain things. You'll see railroad unions, you'll see electrical worker unions, teacher unions, things like that. But on the flip side, sometimes unions get so big that they are way too powerful. I remember, so the auto dealers, years ago when the government bailed out the auto dealers, I can't remember which maker it was, Toyota or one of those, or GM, I don't remember.
I think it was GM, yeah.
GM. So like a worker that put installed steering wheels on cars was making like $80,000 a year. A lot of money. But that's because everything, the union had pushed the fair wage idea so much that it just created inflation. And then we wonder why the automakers were struggling, running out of money. So that's a whole nother conversation too, is how involved should government be in business versus stepping away. We need the regulatory environment, but we've got to let businesses do their thing. I think Ford was the only one that did not accept the bailout, and they took a hit for a while, but they've since recovered and came back up with the market, and in the process got to restructure and kind of start from scratch again. And that's what can happen. But there's a lot of opinion in there too. People have different views on that, but it's the balance of what should be regulated and what should the market be allowed to do on its own. Hi, Casey.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. We're just discussing any questions you have. We're talking about payroll and Fair Labor Standards Act, unions. Marjorie's got some good questions going.
Good, I'll listen in.
Cool. Yeah, so it's pretty fascinating as far as unions go. And then, if you go to the eastern part of the United States, there's a lot more unions, but then as you come west, there's a lot less. So it's just kind of philosophy too. The company I work for, I'm in Idaho, but the company I work for is headquartered in Cincinnati, where there is a lot more union involvement. And we actually train on union avoidance. So, we want to comply by the laws of letting people gather and letting people talk about their wages and about their jobs, but we also don't want, people starting to unionize because that's going to kind of overtake the efforts of the company. So it gets
exactly.
Have any of you worked for a union before?
I have not. My husband's in a union.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, he's a police officer, so it has been beneficial in his situation, but I can completely see why it would be a problem in other situations.
Yeah, law enforcement is a great example. So what does he like about the union as far as a law enforcement standpoint?
Just there's a group of them working together for what their needs are, and somebody's always, like we talk about in our paper, somebody's always there, team leader, putting in a word, keeping what they feel in management's ear, and they just have someone on their side helping them out. So it's been beneficial so far.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the idea of having an advocate.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, having a voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely foundational to why unions begin. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but I don't think they have a problem with the possibility of them striking. So that's good.
Yeah, so there's not a volatile side. That's good.
Yeah, that's not something they would do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it gets difficult, and then everybody's in an uproar, and you strike, and what good does that do? So.
Right.
deal. Any other thoughts or questions about unions? I know my grandfather worked for a union for all of his career, and it was a good thing. There were some drawbacks. He didn't like paying union dues and things like that either. But then, on the other hand, they felt like there was a way to be heard.
Yeah.
So in discussing that, why do you think, we talked about law enforcement, why do you think companies would want to be union, or why do you think they wouldn't?
I mean, he does contribute to the union, but I think with them, the union they provide him attorneys if, they need to. They, help with funeral costs or anything like that if there needs to be things like that. And so I think, that's kind of a little comforting and, for them and their families. But I know of other situations, or have heard of other situations where a union really striking. I think that there's a very rare occasion that that's a positive form of letting your wants be heard. But
Yeah.
usually seems to be a negative outcome from strikes.
I agree. That advocacy will go a long way. Yeah, attorneys, support, protection of wages, tenure. I think tenure has a lot. Does tenure play into law enforcement? I know it does here in Idaho, where pay.
I don't believe I've heard anything about that.
Okay.
Not that isn't the case, but I don't recall hearing that for them.
Yeah. Well, good. What about the flip side? Maybe what are some drawbacks of unions, or why would companies want to stay away from that?
Well, I think they're so expensive. I mean, they're expensive, they just force your hand.
I agree. It's almost, sometimes it can create a whole nother workforce. All the other people you have to bring in. So that's definitely true. For me.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I don't like unions.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm sorry, Casey. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I guess for me, I think maybe for teachers, that is one situation. But I agree. I typically don't care for for unions either.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think it's good to be aware of that and learn kind of what happens within a union, and the negotiation exercise. Usually, yeah, like you said, Marjorie, it's fun. A lot of students like that because it's like, oh, there's a lot that goes into negotiating a wage for frontline employees, and if we don't do it right, they're going to be mad. They might strike. That's hopefully not, but a lot of times that's what can happen.
Yeah.
But on the positive,
that was a terrible outcome too. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was terrible.
Oh, in the exercise, yeah.
In the exercise, sorry, yeah.
I know it's challenging. It's hard to please everyone, too, in a union. But on the positive, it's an effort to try to create that advocacy. Sorry, I'm trying to find a scripture when that was brought up. Oh, and advocate. So, on a spiritual note, we know that Jesus Christ is our advocate with the Father. In my announcement this week, I mentioned unity. So there are definitely principles that we can draw from unions. The idea of unity and advocacy. Doctrine and Covenants talks about that a lot. Section 29, 4 and 5. It says, I say unto you that ye are chosen out of the world to declare my gospel with the sound of a rejoicing, as with the voice of a trump. Lift your hearts and be glad, for I am in your midst, and am your advocate with the Father, and it is his good will to give you the kingdom. So, on a spiritual sense and in a perfect sense, the gospel sense, we do have a union that happens in the gospel. and we have an advocate who is Jesus Christ. And I think, so to speak, our union dues would be our faithfulness and our covenants. So I'm thankful for that, to be a people of covenant. The world says, oh, that's just weird. But being a people of covenant brings a lot of strength to individuals. It brings a lot of strength to me personally, to my family. Through all the difficult things that happen to us, we have that strength of unity. We can be unionized together as a people, and know that Christ is going to advocate for us no matter what happens. So thank you. That scripture came to mind when we were discussing that advocate word.
That's a good one.
Any other thoughts with that advocate idea, or anything that came to mind?
No, I like that you brought that up. Thank you.
Well, you bet. Well, good. Appreciate your discussion and joining. I know we're all busy, but it's fun to discuss. So, kind of recap, Porter, I'm going to look into that flat rate pay, those questions that you had.
All right.
I'll send out the website links for the NLRB and the FLSA. You can look at that. The FLSA, there's a quick little 3-minute video that you can watch that explains it really clearly what took place there. And yeah, payroll itself is a whole world itself. Good stuff. Anything I can do for you? Any questions before we tail off here?
I had one question about this week's. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, just this week's Hangout. So only one of us of our whole entire team needs to submit the memo for the discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
It's got the two parts. The main thing was so that you can kind of have that exercise, but whoever was the discussion leader for the week, the post, or if everybody's been the discussion leader twice, you don't need to post if everybody's done it twice. That's something to remember. But yeah, just one post.
Okay.
So.
That's all. Thanks.
You bet. Well, thank you all. I'll post this link out there as usual, and we will talk to you guys soon.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, bye.
All right, you bet. Take care.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.